All right. Hey, everybody. We are live. Thanks for joining us for Techy Tuesday today. We have Lynn with us, and we have our Director of Technology in Livingston Parish, Mr. Carlos Williams. And he is going to be talking to us today about supporting blended learning site-wide. So at your schools, or if you manage more than one school, what are some of the things that you need to make sure that you are definitely going over, that you are supporting your teachers with, and just best practices as far as that goes. So Carlos, do you want to share your screen with us, and I will throw it on up?
Sure. Let's go ahead and get this pulled up.
And while we're waiting, any questions you have, please feel free to post them in the comments. I did have some that came in, people who could not attend. Remember that you can always watch this later. This recording will live here on this channel forever. So if you've missed it, or you know and have friends who've missed it and are really interested in hearing about it, make sure that you tell them, hey, all you have to do is come to the channel. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So click share screen.
All right.
On the little white box in the bottom.
Okay.
Of StreamYard.
Yep. Hold on a second. All right. You have me? I think I see it here.
I don't see it.
All right. I've clicked share screen, Heather, but it will not. My shared button is ghosted out.
Okay. Well, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it up and I will share it. And then you can just tell me when to forward the presentation slides, and then I can just take care of that for you.
Sounds
all right.
Great.
So I'm going to take myself and Lynn out of here. And if we have any questions, we will pop back in. But if not, then it's all for you.
All right, guys. Again, thank you so much. There you have a little example of some of the contingency plans you have to have in working in a digital environment. But what we wanted to talk to you about just a minute today is how do we support blended instruction on our campuses? And why would we even be interested in doing that in the first place? So we'll talk about that just real quickly here for just a couple of minutes. And then we're going to try to have a little question and answer session, because I think probably the most important things are those questions that you have and what you need to know. Please feel free to make a question or comment. And while this is geared more towards site-based leaders, hey, if you're a teacher and you're interested in some of the components that go into managing this, please do stay on with us, and we'll discuss some things that are probably interesting to you also. But we're going to do this from the perspective of folks who are trying to manage and maintain a blended learning environment on their school sites. Now, for us, we're in kind of a unique position because we had, due to the tragedy of occurrence that we're all dealing with right now, we were given gifts of money and gifts of tools and things like that by the federal government to help us through this. And as a result, now we have tools in almost all of our classrooms that before we may not have had. So the opportunities that we have to engage in blended learning and blended instruction in our classrooms is here before us right now. And that's why it's really important that we take advantage of leveraging what we've got to do the best that we can for our students. So Heather, if you'll click me. I wanted to start off with a little quote from George Couros. He, along with several other folks or people you may want to read a little bit more from as far as blended instruction goes, folks like Eric Schenniger, Western Kashinaninik, and other people like that. You may want to read up a little bit on some of their thoughts about blended instruction. But basically, what he's saying here is technology will not replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational. And really what that's talking about is the idea that just because you have computers in your classroom does not mean that that computer is what's going to end up teaching those kids. As a matter of fact, blended instruction is not about that at all. What blended instruction is really about is taking those excellent instructional practices that we've always had and we've always known about, and then using tools to make them more effective and more realistic for us to try to accomplish. One of the things when I talk to people from other districts, other states, and even the schools inside our district, that they say most often is, there are really good instructional practices and things that I know that I'm supposed to be doing every day, or that I would like to see happen in my classrooms every day at my school site, but there's just not enough time in the day to realistically expect that this should happen. So really what blended instruction does is it incorporates some of those tools that actually give you a realistic opportunity, time-wise, to be able to do some of these things that we've wanted to do all along and that we all know that good teachers should be doing. So that's a very important thing to start off with when we're framing our discussion today. And Heather. Okay, one of the big things that you really need to do when you're engaged in blended instruction is focus your time and your effort and your energies on what matters most. If you are on the live stream with us today, or you're taking a few minutes later on down the road to watch this presentation, that means that you did feel like this was worth your time. And your time is valuable, and we appreciate you being with us. Since our time is so valuable, there is a lot of situations where we would like to do things and we just don't get around to them. One of the things that you have an opportunity to do as you migrate into a blended learning environment is relook at those things on your campus that you feel like are most important instructionally, and focus your time, focus your energy, and focus your resources on those things. There may be some practices and some things we've done for years and years and years at our campuses, and we just keep doing them because we've done them for a long time. But they no longer hold the same value as they used to hold, or serve the same purpose in some cases. So really, as you have a chance now to move your instruction forward into a different level, it's time to really, as a school, look at what you feel like is most important on your campuses. What makes the biggest impact? What are the things that are going to have the biggest effect on students and their performance? And so there's no sacred cows when we're talking about this. Everything's on the table and everything gets reviewed. And then we really, really, really decide what are the most important things to us in our school program. And when we spend our valuable, valuable time, we want to spend our time first on those things that make the biggest impact. And then we'll get around to some of those other things that we like to do if we get a chance. But the majority of our time and effort should be spent on those things that make the biggest impact. And so you may ask, well, how do I know what makes the biggest impact on student learning? We can go to research for that. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but if you're not, you probably do want to read a little bit about John Hattie's research. His research is conducted over the course of years and years and years and years. And actually, it's a type of study called a cumulative study, where he actually takes research from other researchers, numerically values the findings of that research, and puts it into a huge collection. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's over 1,500 research studies that go into his accumulation of information that he uses for his research. And his research, and why we're talking about it today, is on effect size. Now, I hope you can see the little words on your screen. And if not, just look up John Hattie and effect size, and you'll get information, and you'll get this exact chart in many different sources and outlets if you look at it. But if you can see the little words that are on the screen right now, you'll notice that there's some things on here that make a bigger impact than others. And actually, again, this is, remember, an accumulation of over 1,500 research studies that he used to gain the information and then evaluate it numerically. But these are the things at the top of the list that have the greatest effect on student performance and student achievement. And there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things on this list. And it goes all the way from the biggest impact to the smallest impact. And even some things that have really negative impacts on students, like moving around a lot. But if you'll look at the very top of the list, you see things like teachers' perspective on student performance, and things like teacher efficacy and teacher clarity and teacher credibility are all towards the very, very, very top of this list. That's how important our teachers are to us, how much value they have to us, and how important the instruction, what's actually going on in our classrooms is for our students. And a lot of it has to do with the quality of instruction that they're getting. So before you look at anything else that's actually an instructional strategy, you see that these things are at the very top of the list. So having quality instruction in our classrooms, is it important? Yes, according to this, it is the most important thing. Teachers' perspectives on what they can do and accomplish with kids and what kids can accomplish, if you look at this effect size, matters more than anything else does. And again, remember 1,500 studies regarding different aspects of this. So these are the things that matter the absolute most. Now, if you go into some of the little areas there, and this presentation is going to be included in the information down below the video. If you're looking at it on YouTube, you have a little link right there that just popped up. But if you look at the little highlighted areas, you see instructional strategies that are very, very important, that have huge effect size on student achievement. And they're things that we try to do or that we would like to do in our classrooms on a regular basis, on a daily basis. You'll see things like response to intervention. You'll also see things like given feedback, formative assessing, and also things like differentiating instruction, acceleration for students that need a little extra challenge. Those things have a huge impact on student achievement. And they also have something else in common. Those are also the things that, due to time constraints and sometimes a lack of resources, that we find the most challenging to do in a meaningful and impactful way. So, hey, where do digital tools come in? Right here. They come in a way that allows you to do these things, which are great instructional practices, things that we have always wanted to try to do in our classrooms that we should probably be doing on a daily basis, but we just haven't never had the time to do it. But now, because of the tools that we can take advantage of, we have the opportunity to engage in these activities, and for it to be a reasonable and realistic expectation, site leaders, instructional leaders, that when you walk into your classrooms on a daily basis, that you're seeing teachers doing this meaningfully and impactfully with their students. So that's the great power in this, and that's why Kiro said that giving a good teacher these tools is transformational. So instead of that person struggling to hand out exit tickets and then pick them up, and then the very best of us just kind of glance through them real quick and kind of see whether the class is doing okay as a whole. Now you can do a little quiz in a variety of different platforms, get back information almost instantaneously, and not just see how the class is done as a whole, but see how an individual student's doing. And then you can use that to do things like either offer intervention or offer acceleration to that child, depending on where they're at. And most of that can be done for us after some work in the setup by a click of a button. So that's why a blended learning environment is so powerful for us today. It doesn't do away with those great instructional methods. It just gives us the tools to do them more effectively and more efficiently. So there's a few things that you might want to consider when you start thinking about supporting blended learning on your campuses. And on the next slide, we're going to look at those real quickly. Here's just a few areas to consider when moving towards blended learning. And I know some of y'all have already taken a lot of these steps and moved your campus in this direction. And I would encourage some of y'all to share, some comments or some questions that you've had since you've started taking those steps. Because the more we do and the more we learn and the further we go, the more questions it often brings up. The very first thing that I think that you really need to look at doing is when you're planning, you need to start by answering the question, what's most important? What's most important to you on your campus? What's most important to you to see instructionally in your classrooms? What are those things that you feel like mean the most to your students and have the biggest impact on them? And those are the things when planning that you need to make sure that you're really, really, really supporting. You need to think optimistically and realistically about what your goals are on your campus. Everybody's at a little bit different spot and a little bit different situation. So you need to think about taking, for example, where your folks are at and where your campus is at, staff and students. And you need to come up with some realistic expectations for what you want to see instructionally in classrooms. And like I said, it's going to be a little different for everybody, depending on your community, your grade band level that you're working with, but also how far along the process you are. But hey, give yourself something to actually reach for and to stretch a little bit, to make yourself a little bit uncomfortable and that you're going to have to work at a little bit. But don't forget to be realistic also with what your expectations are. That's a really big component of all of that. We can all reach for the stars, but sometimes we put those goals so far out ahead of us that we really can't come up with anything that we can show that we've made progress towards those goals. So think about where you're at and think about what's most important in that way. After you've decided what those goals are that you have at your school, what you think is most important and what you're going to work on supporting, you need to create some short-term actionable steps that you can get started with and you can check off and hold yourself accountable and the people on your campus accountable for having done. This is very, very, very important, particularly when you're starting the process of moving into this environment. If you've got a lot of folks on your campus, both staff and students, who aren't as used to working in this environment, it's very important that you give people some concrete steps and goals that are short term that they can realistically accomplish so that you get a good foundation and a good footing on the path that you want to go to so that you can reach those long-term goals that you have. So how are you going to get there? You've got to look and see what kind of resources you have at your disposal. What do you have human resource-wise at your site that you can call upon and use? What are your physical resources and what are some avenues from which that you can provide the tools and support that you need to your staff? How much are the things that you want to do? How much is it going to cost? And that's a perfect time for us just to mention real carefully. When we talked about deciding what was most important on your campuses, folks, we're talking about that from a money standpoint too. We're talking about budgeting. And the same thing applies. Those things that were sacred cows that you felt like you've done for years and that you've just always done and wanted to keep doing, that you're now going to revisit. You're doing the same thing with your budget and the way you allocate resources at your sites too. So everything's on the table and you need to allocate towards the things that you feel like are most important and are going to have the most impact first. Time is a big deal. What are you going to allow for? What's realistic for you and your expectations of your folks? How much time do you allow them to have to reach the goals and to meet the expectations that you have for them? That's a key component of this. And it brings up a comment or a phrase that we use quite often when you're talking about blended learning, and it is most master most. So just like everything else, you're revisiting what you're teaching too. And all curriculum and all content is important, but there's some parts of that probably that are keystone standards or keystone things, pieces of knowledge that your students need to have. And really, you have to work on making sure that most of your students have most of that sort of thing mastered first. So again, when you're planning instructionally, that's the stuff you're going to focus on your campus too. And it's all a time issue. It's all a time issue. Facilities, same thing. How are you setting up your campus and what you have available to facilitate this type of instruction? Support, professional development. And as you can see, we have professional development and training separated here because there is a true difference in helping somebody develop professionally along a given path or a given line, and then training somebody how to use something. Let's take, for example, if Heather, Lynn, or Nikki came and showed your staff how to use a teacher device that had a digital inking pen. That's a training. Having them actually go into the classroom and use that effectively and then share what they've done and continue learning along those lines, that falls in the category of professional development. So they're two kind of different things. Tools, what can I give my folks at my site and my campus, to meet the goals and the expectations that I have for them? Am I giving them what they need? Where's the areas that I need to improve in that? And then troubleshooting. This is new for everybody, folks. So part of the transition here and part of the struggle here is that if you're going to be living and working in a digital environment, you have to know how to live and work in a digital environment. And so there's going to be things along that line that you're going to have to teach people about and that you're going to have to help people with. And people are going to have to be comfortable enough to solve some of their own problems also. And that just takes time and it takes education. But that's a big component of this also is, quickly troubleshooting basic problems so that, the educational process doesn't stop. And an example of that is what we did here at the very beginning of the presentation. For whatever reason, I couldn't share my screen appropriately. So Heather had it on standby to show you the presentation so that we could have the information there for you that you wanted. Okay, guys, like I said, it was real quick and it was very frameworkish rather than giving you a lot of information. Because what I really wanted you to do is to think a little bit about some of the basic things or ideas that we've shared, and then share some of the questions that you may have. And again, I think Heather has a list of questions that people submitted ahead of time, but then also you are more than welcome to add questions or comments, in those fields also, and we'll pick those up. I'd actually prefer to answer your questions than I would, some just keep talking to you about things. So we'll start with some of the questions, and Heather and Lynn are joining us back for the Q&A part because there may be some components of it too that they can share and give us some meaningful, impactful information on also. So Heather, what do we have?
Well, first things first, whether you are on Facebook or you are on YouTube watching, you can share your question and I will be able to ask it. So please do not hesitate to throw out any question you might have about this whole process. We're here to answer. A lot of the questions that came to me kind of went with training and encouraging those that might be a little hesitant to do it. So how would you train people most effectively at your site? And in doing so, encourage those that are a little hesitant to dip their toe into the new tools and technology and get them more comfortable so that they feel that they can be effective in their classrooms.
Okay. So one of the other phrases that if you read Kuros and a couple of the other folks that are big into the blended learning scene is the idea that we're all new teachers and that we look at each year and we look at each situation in each classroom and every new thing that we find as being a new teacher. So the idea that I'm new and I need to learn is something that we should, kind of continue with and kind of cultivate. If we start with that perspective, then what we have is a fertile ground to share new information with people and to give them new tools and resources to use. So one of the things that you really need to do is to make sure that you're taking advantage of what you already have there on your campus and your site. Now we have, guys, a ton of information on our website, a ton of training videos, a ton of professional development opportunities. Heather, Lynn, Nikki, everybody, is there to help and assist in this process. So I do want you to know that. But here's something that sometimes we overlook. There are people actually on my school site that have probably moved a little further into this than others. And if I'm really, really, in tune with what's going on in my classrooms and know who's out there using some of these things and effectively, then I probably have some folks actually on my campus who can aid and assist with some of this training. If you have somebody who's doing an excellent job getting and giving feedback to their students, then do share that with other people on your campus. Sometimes teachers love teaching students, but they feel a little hesitant about sharing those things that are working well in their classroom with their peers for whatever reason. But leverage those people and those resources that you have on your campus as well. And remember, everybody's got to start somewhere. Some schools that have been successful with this and other places also may have a mentor teacher or somebody that can work very closely with some teachers that are struggling. One of the things that we have found works best for us, even at the district level, is when we can share out teachers at different school sites with other teachers who are seeing some success and using some things effectively. It's very meaningful to have people who can actually show concrete examples of how a tool works effectively to other teachers who will be doing almost the exact same thing. If they can see those examples, it makes a big deal. And it makes a difference in how accepting they are of maybe taking a chance. It's also important, I think, to make sure that people understand that we're new to this and that as being new people or quote unquote new teachers, as some people have said, that we're not going to be maybe necessarily A1 in use of these tools automatically at the very beginning. And that this is a process. And I think something that's very important to communicate to your staff as you start this process is this is something that y'all are going to work together on, and that you're going to try to provide the help and resources that they need to make the progress. Another thing that I think that's very important as you start this with your staff is that you do the best that you can to model the expectations that you have for them using the tools and the resources. So if one of the things that you really want your staff to use is StreamYard to stream presentations and things, then how about doing that with your staff a few times also, and really dig into this. I don't know if we have any instructional coaches on the call today, but you folks almost overnight turned into blended learning instructional coaches because of the situation that you've been in. And so, providing that support there at the school level and helping people to understand that we're not just making changes in this situation for change's sake, but it's actually to benefit students and to help them be the good teachers that they all want to be. That's real important too. Those are some first steps in the process. And I think, Heather and Lynn, y'all might have something to add to that.
I think, something that I tell people a lot when I do a training or professional development, or even when I was, teaching in the classroom, is not to be afraid to fail. One of the ISTE standards for educators, and ISTE is the International Society of Technology and Education, is that you as a teacher learn alongside with your students. So don't be afraid to try that new tool. I used to say, we're going to try something new today. It's either going to be great or it's going to be terrible. And when we're done with it, we can decide whether we think this is something that we want to try to use again, or if this is something that just did not work well for us. The only way to know if a tool is going to be effective or is going to be, something that your students are really going to latch onto and be able to create great things or prove their mastery with knowledge is to give them the opportunity to do so. So put them in charge of it. Say, okay, guys, 5 minutes. I need y'all to figure out how this works. Well, let's get together. Let's teach the class. And then, kind of build on that. So that's an important thing is, teachers are so afraid of making mistakes. Don't be afraid to make those mistakes. Own it and be authentic with your students, because then it also shows them that it's okay to be wrong. We are not going to be right even 50% of the time. Most of the time we're learning something new, and that's okay. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. So that's just, the one tidbit that I would throw in on that.
Lynn?
I agree with you that schools need to utilize what they have on campus. There are wonderful teachers in all of our schools. And so I really feel that, of course, we're willing to come out and do trainings, but a lot of times you don't need to reach that far because you have people right there that can help. So
absolutely,
I feel very strongly about that.
Okay. And so then one last question, what sorts of things should I see in my classroom when evaluating whether someone is effectively teaching in a blended environment?
Well, the answer to that is going to be a little different from site to site probably, but it's going to go back to those things when you were doing your planning and you were thinking about what was most important. It goes back to those things which you marked as your goals, which you marked were the instructional practices that you want to see. So, for example, we use this because it's pretty easy and it's something that makes a big impact. Before you would say, okay, teachers, I want you to make sure that you're getting and giving feedback to your students every day. And we would walk through classrooms and see if they were doing that, if it was meaningful, if it was impactful for the students. And a lot of the strategies that they used before, and they were doing the absolute best that they could with what they had at their disposal in their time, were things just like basic question and answer, or were things like exit tickets and that sort of stuff. And they served the purpose as best they could, and they helped the teacher do some things that did help them understand a little bit more about where their students were at and give students a little bit more feedback as to what's going on. But really, if we were honest with ourselves and looked at exactly, what kind of feedback I was given, what kind of feedback the kids were giving me in relation to what I was discussing with them, we did not go nearly as far as I know would be optimal or what we would really want to do. So, for example, if you went into a blended learning classroom and saw the same thing, you may see teachers using a Kahoot or some other type of little quiz program to do the same thing. So what's the difference? The difference is now the teacher has very quick feedback, can see which kids know which questions, which kids don't know which questions. And then here's the part where it becomes real impactful. They can actually use that information and do something with it. That's why if you read Hattie's research, he said he feels like really the one thing that makes the biggest impact is giving feedback to students and having students give you feedback. And the reason he says that is because that is kind of the linchpin of everything else you need to do. If you can get feedback to students and have them give feedback to you from whatever method of little formative assessment that you're trying to do in those classrooms, then you can use that information and you can use that data to actually give kids acceleration opportunities, to give kids intervention or remedial opportunities that need it. So that's one example of something that you might see effectively. And Lynn, I know is going to help me out on this part. Teaching in a blended learning environment does not mean that you're going to go into that classroom and see a bunch of computers open every day. And that's actually not appropriate. It just depends on if that instructional practice that you're using that day that you felt was most important for that lesson, if it could benefit from having a tool, or incorporating some of that stuff. There's no reason to log in and turn a computer on and take the time to do that if it's not going to be something that's going to be impactful for the instructional practices that I'm trying to support that day in class. Now, for pretty much any of those instructional practices that were real high on Hattie's effect size list, we do have a tool available or something that you can use or leverage that's going to make that easier and quicker for you. And easier and quicker means the more that you can do and the more that you can expect. So what's the big difference for you, school leaders, instructional leaders, in moving into this environment? A lot of it is you can actually realistically have expectations for your staff that you've kind of had all along, but you can expect to see it on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
So asking teachers to get and give feedback impactfully to kids every day is now a very realistic thing to say I need to see in my classroom. Differentiating instruction on a daily basis is now, because of the tools that we have, something that you can actually go into a classroom and say, hey, I want to see this happening instructionally in our classrooms on a daily basis. So what you're really looking for is, are those instructional practices being met? And in order for them to do them probably the way, with as much efficacy as they can, they're going to have to be leveraging some of those tools. So I think it just kind of goes hand in hand. So those are some of the things that you're going to see, I think. You're going to see student engagement and involvement and student voice in what's going on in the classroom increase as you use these tools too. I think you see a lot of that. And of course, we all know that's one of those higher goals that we have instructionally, according to our super important compass rubrics that we use and everything, is having students lead thought and having students discuss things. You'll see a lot of those things happen. And what you're really looking for is, are they leveraging those digital tools to do that impactfully? And I think that's kind of a real short answer to that question. And we just used one example to kind of try to answer it. But that would show itself for whatever instruction practice you were looking for. Are we using tools to leverage that and to do it the most effectively that we can? That's what you'd be looking for.
Absolutely.
And I have a question that came in through email. They were having trouble asking a question through YouTube, and so they sent me a question for you through email. And Heather, this may be actually a question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
But anyway, I've been kind of back and forth with her, but her question is, what's an example of an interactive tool to teach math to students? We're using Kahoot quizzes to assess.
Okay, so I really think that it kind of depends on the type of lesson that you're looking for.
This is pathways, so these are going to be.
A lot of times with math, you have to show and work so many examples, and so a lot of the digital whiteboards are kind of popular. And next week, we're actually going to, our Techy Tuesday is about Jamboard, which is the Google interactive whiteboard. So definitely tune in. Amanda Robinson is going to be talking about using Jamboard. And I loved that one because it would be a collaborative whiteboard basically for students to work with. Other things that you can do is there's so many digital manipulatives out there as far as math goes that are free. So that's a kind of a nice thing too, because you can get all of the different pieces and stuff that you can put together. It doesn't cost you anything. You can't lose them. They don't rattle around on the ground. And if you are in a virtual environment, everybody kind of has access to those. Another great digital whiteboard is Whiteboard Chat. It's completely free. It's a newer one, but it has so many different things that you can do with it and features and things. And you can even do almost like a Zoom call within it. So that one's Whiteboard Chat. There's Desmos, there's GeoGebra. There are tons and tons and tons of tools out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, please email me, heather.white@lpsb.org, because math teacher here, love talking math and blended learning. You kind of give me an idea of what it is you are trying to accomplish, and I can work with you and we can take a look at what we can find to help your students out with that. And that goes for anybody listening in. Any questions you have, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We've got like a great, elementary, middle, high school, stepping stone as far as facilitators go here. And we've kind of, between all of us, taught all of the subjects. So we definitely can help you out. Email us, drop a line here in the comments or whatever. Just let us know whatever it is you need us to assist you with. That is what we're here for. And you are not bothering us. That is literally what our job is. So please do not hesitate, to reach out and ask us for assistance. Thank you, Carlos, for sharing your expertise, sort of site-wide type things. Again, any other questions that you come up with, if you rewatch this, if you're catching it later or after you've sort of ruminated over it and gone, I wish I could have asked that question, shoot an email. We're here for you. We will help you out if we need to hop on a Zoom or whatever. We can do that. But we do appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And again, next Tuesday, 3:30 p.m., same place, same time. We're going to be talking about Jamboard, and they've come out with a bunch of new updates recently, and it is phenomenal. And Amanda Robinson is really great at presenting. Y'all are going to love it. So we're going to sign off now unless anyone else has something to add. We good? All right. Well, again, thanks for joining in, y'all, and we will catch you next week. Bye.
Bye.